Hey everyone, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a Watchman Livecast news stream. A lot going on. It's 4:01 Eastern time. I'm 1 minute late. I apologize, but a lot going on. Obviously, trying to keep up on all the latest news as I come to you right now. Again, it's 4 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, August 26th, and I'm just hearing as I come to you here for the live stream that there was news of another explosion in Kabul around the airport. I will glance at my phone over the next hour. That's right. I'm with you till 5 p.m. Eastern time, and I will glance at my phone to at least see what is going on so we can bring you some updates, hopefully. So if I look down, don't be offended. It's not because I'm not paying attention to you. It's just I want to bring you the most up-to-date information here on this Watchman Newscast live stream. Trying to catch my breath, as you can tell, running around all day, following the situation in Afghanistan very, very closely. Obviously, a major escalation. And if you're just joining us, again, welcome. We're going for a full hour here till 5 p.m. Eastern time. Bring your questions. We will do a Q&A at the end. We've got a lot to discuss. Massive terror attack in Kabul, deadly terror attack. At least 12 U.S. soldiers, mostly Marines, killed as I come to you right now. God forbid those numbers increase, but they may. At least 15 U.S. soldiers wounded at Kabul Airport. I'm hearing reports that perhaps dozens of Afghans have been killed as well in this terror attack. ISIS has claimed responsibility. The Pentagon says it was indeed ISIS. They're confirming that. ISIS-K in particular, ISIS, the Khorasan branch of ISIS, an offshoot of this jihadi terror organization, carried out this attack in what appears to be, it's been called a complex attack with suicide bombers involved. And after the bombs went off, gunfire, kind of the ISIS MO, folks. I've covered ISIS a whole lot over the years. I wrote a book about ISIS called ISIS Exposed back in 2015. If you're interested, you can find it on Amazon.com still. But this has been an ISIS MO, the suicide bombings accompanied by a shooter or a stabber, multiple facets to their attacks. And that's exactly what happened today at Kabul Airport. If you're just joining us, welcome. We've already got close to 1,000 people with us, and many more will join, I know, for such a time as this. Again, we've got a lot to discuss. So just to lay it out, at least 12 U.S. soldiers killed, as many as 15 more wounded. That's what we know so far around 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. Those numbers, I'm sad to say, may increase, God forbid, but this harkens back to me, the first things I thought of, the 1983 Marine barracks bombing in Beirut, which killed 243 U.S. Marines, a Hezbollah suicide bomber on the orders of the Iranian regime. And we'll talk about them a bit, too, as we go on. But that attack came to mind. Black Hawk Down in 1993 in Somalia, I believe 18 U.S. service members killed in that attack. The USS Cole in 2000 off the coast of Yemen, over a dozen U.S. soldiers, sailors actually in that situation, killed as well. So this kind of track record is what I'm looking at right now of U.S. service members being killed on the ground. In each of those situations, the U.S. essentially pulled out. Somalia, certainly after Black Hawk Down. Lebanon, 1983, U.S. troops left as well. No real retaliation to the USS Cole attack, which was carried out by Al-Qaeda about 11 months before the 9/11 attacks. And now we have this today. If you thought the war on terror or the war against, more fitting would be the global jihad. If you thought that was done and over with, think again, because the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and we'll talk about this over the next hour, has empowered and emboldened America's enemies to a degree that we have not seen in some time. And among them includes, yes, ISIS, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda branches around the world. They have been still active, but obviously not as strong as they were. I'm talking Al-Qaeda and ISIS. ISIS in particular was really smashed in Syria and Iraq. That caliphate was destroyed. President Trump kept his word. You know, it's interesting, and he accomplished that. He destroyed the physical caliphate of ISIS in the Middle East. And, you know, it's interesting. Someone wrote yesterday, man, I could really use some mean tweets right now. One of the reasons they couldn't stand President Trump because of his mean tweets and some of the things he said. but they didn't really discuss the policies. And the policies kept America safe in the foreign policy realm and the national security realm. So I'll take a mean tweet over complete and utter weakness and incompetence, which is what we are seeing right now out of the White House. Folks, it's alarming. It is disturbing. This should have never happened. This was completely unavoidable. The deaths of these brave U.S. service members today, this did not have to happen. Remember, U.S. troops were withdrawn. They were sent back in as the Taliban seized virtually the entire country, including the capital, Kabul. Close to 6,000 U.S. soldiers were sent back into harm's way at Kabul Airport. A lot of questions are still surrounding what happened today. Again, ISIS claiming responsibility, but was the Taliban involved somehow in facilitating this? There's been a lot of people saying over the past week, hey, ISIS and the Taliban, they hate each other. They have fought each other. Very true. They have locked horns, certainly, over the years. But there's an old saying in the world of radical Islam in which they both travel: the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And it is not beyond the realm of possibility that the Taliban would look the other way and allow ISIS to strike U.S. service members as one last kick out the door of in this chaotic withdrawal, as the U.S., not U.S. service members, but the U.S. leadership has us leaving with our tails between our legs, except this horrific, deadly attack today. Will the U.S. retaliate? There has to be, to my mind, folks, some kind of retaliation by the United States. It's difficult to pin down. Once they have the intelligence as to who did this, and again, ISIS claimed responsibility. Once they pin down some of these ISIS and locate some of these ISIS-K hideouts in Afghanistan, in and around Kabul, the U.S. should retaliate with overwhelming force. Will President Biden do that? It's unclear. Again, I'm coming to you now with this live stream. Events may be unfolding right now. Apparently, President Biden is going to speak, I believe, as soon as this live stream is over, around 5 p.m. Eastern time. What is he going to say? Obviously, an earth-shattering day for the United States. As an American, a proud American citizen, I'm devastated by this. I'm grieved to my heart to see what's happening to my country and the reputation of my country under the leadership we currently have, if you can call it leadership. And for those brave U.S. service members, I mean, these are men and women who would jump at the chance to go out on the streets of Kabul, engage the enemy in order to save American citizens who are there. And by the way, to save Afghans who literally put their necks on the line in defiance of the Taliban over the past 20 years to work with us, and who now it looks like may very well be abandoned. President Biden says he's sticking to that August 31st withdrawal date, which means U.S. soldiers may have to, they're likely packing up equipment already in preparation of leaving. Already several hundred U.S. soldiers have reportedly left Afghanistan. Does today change the timetable? Some European nations are saying, hey, we're staying until the job is done and we get all of our citizens out. No one left behind. That used to be the motto of the United States. It's certainly still the motto of our military, our brave service members there. But does this administration have the same view? Well, we have to ask that because, folks, look, yesterday the State Department said there are 1,500 U.S. citizens still on the ground in Afghanistan, and an untold number of Afghans who work with us, and a good number of Afghan Christians. By the way, I was just reading some pieces before I came on here and joined you about Afghan Christians being turned away from the airport. And there have been several reports over the past week that the Taliban has identified followers of Jesus in Afghanistan and have already made threats saying, we know who you are and we're coming to get you. There have also been reports of the Taliban scrolling through people's phones as they go door to door looking for collaborators, in their words, and looking for Bible apps. And if you have it, they will kill you. If you have a Bible app on your phone, I've spoken to several people today and over the past 2 weeks who are in steady contact with Afghan believers, Christians on the ground in Afghanistan. And it is a nightmarish, folks, it's a nightmarish story. Pray. Prayer works. Pray with purpose and pray without ceasing. I mentioned this on a previous newscast. I interviewed a friend of mine, Reverend Johnny Moore, last week. And I said, what can we do for the Christians in Afghanistan? They're a small minority, yes, but they are there nonetheless. And there are missionaries there who have bravely gone there to preach the gospel and spread the gospel to the ends of the earth. And he said, they want you to pray for them. And I know it almost sounds cliched. Well, I'm going to pray for him. He's having a tough day. He said, no, pray for them. Pray with purpose. Folks, listen very closely. He said, pray for them how you would want to be prayed for if you yourself were in a dire situation and your life was at risk. That kind of changes the whole calculus, doesn't it, of your prayer life when we are praying for the persecuted church in Afghanistan and elsewhere around the world. How would you want to be prayed for if you were an Afghan Christian right now, hiding with your family in your basement as the Taliban is going door to door looking for you? How would you want to be prayed for? Folks, that to me was just, it sent shockwaves through me, and it really was a game changer in terms of how I'm praying for the persecuted church around the world. And by the way, I'm praying for everyone in Afghanistan, of course, the women of Afghanistan, and again, the people who work with the U.S., the people who want no parts of Taliban rule. But folks, it's here. Some people have said perhaps the Taliban will moderate. That's been kind of bandied about over the past 2 weeks. Have you heard that scenario and that outlook? I don't see it. As a matter of fact, folks, I believe, and I hate to say this, but if you watch me on a regular basis here in the Watchman Newscast, you know I don't mince words, and I'm going to give it to you straight. I believe we may see an even more, if it's possible, more radical version of the Taliban than we saw between 1996 and 2001. I think ISIS upped the game in terms of jihadist brutality during the years 2013 to 2017 when they were particularly strong. And I think the Taliban has to match that, number one. But number two, think about it. They've been waiting for 20 years after they were really knocked on their heels by the United States in the aftermath of 9/11, obviously. For 20 years, they've suffered heavy losses. They've been waiting and waiting and waiting. The hatred that the Taliban have in their hearts for their fellow Afghans, for anyone who worked with the U.S., for women, it's been building up for 20 years. And they've lost again. A lot of their comrades in arms have been killed, and they want revenge. And there is a bloodlust among this group, and now they have all the power, practically, in Afghanistan. Do you really think they're going to moderate now that they have the power after 20 years of fighting and fighting to establish a jihadist Islamist emirate ruled by Sharia law in Afghanistan? I'm not optimistic, folks. I don't think so. And the fact that the Biden administration has said repeatedly that they are essentially relying on the goodwill of the Taliban to allow Americans safe passage to the airport, it's mind-boggling. These are the people who facilitated the 9/11 attacks, who gave al-Qaeda safe harbor, and refused to hand over Osama bin Laden. And by the way, a Taliban spokesman said in an interview just last night that he does not believe Osama bin Laden was behind 9/11, and there is no evidence to that fact, defending the honor, in his view, of Osama bin Laden. So this is what you're dealing with right now. Not beyond the realm of possibility, as I mentioned, that the Taliban would work closely, even though they've been at loggerheads with ISIS, without a doubt, that in this situation, with a common enemy, the United States, in their midst, perhaps they would work together in this instance, then go back to killing each other a few weeks from now. Certainly, the Taliban has a fully operational and very close, seamless relationship with al-Qaeda. They have since before 9/11, and they still do today. But ISIS, again, claiming responsibility for this horrific attack today. If you do not mind, and we have thousands of people with us right now, welcome. If you're just joining us, you can catch the first 15 minutes of this Watchman Newscast live stream, breaking news all over the place in our archives here. This video will be posted the full hour when we're done. Be sure to subscribe as well and click the notification bell. We're going to have a lot coming to you in the coming days, folks. We are in perilous times, and we are also in Bible times. We're going to talk about that more today as well, the prophetic implications of what's unfolding in Afghanistan right now, and there are, for certain. But let me take a quick glance at the headlines. I don't want to be behind here as we are coming here with breaking news. Just glancing at my phone, Now we have news of U.S. aircraft taking fire above Kabul. So essentially U.S. aircraft, which are evacuating Americans, God willing, and Afghans who helped the United States, evacuating them from Kabul Airport, Hamid Karzai International Airport. Now those aircraft are taking fire from the ground. A few hours after, suicide bombings killed 12 U.S. service members, killed dozens of Afghans, reportedly. Now there's fire. Now U.S. Aircraft are being fired upon out of Kabul. And folks, think about this. I mentioned this on yesterday's newscast. Billions of dollars in U.S. military hardware is now in the hands of the Taliban. I mean, advanced weaponry, including U.S. helicopters and aircraft and all sorts of, I'm sure, anti-missile and anti-aircraft weaponry that can now be used to target U.S. planes that are leaving Kabul Airport. This is really happening, the nightmare scenario before our eyes, and it did not have to happen. This is all because of weak and feckless leadership and horrific decision-making. We can talk all day about whether the U.S. should have completely withdrawn from Afghanistan. President Trump had the same plan, but not like this. It would not have gone down like this, the way it has gone down here. And you've heard all this over the past 2 weeks, I'm sure. Let me reiterate real quick so you understand. You can't say, oh, you're just going after Biden. You're a partisan political guy. I am not. What I'm saying to you is fact. There is no way that the U.S. should have evacuated Bagram Air Base. No way. And given that to the Taliban and any other air base in Afghanistan until every last American was out of the country. That's the most obvious. The second most obvious. Why would you withdraw every last U.S. soldier before U.S. citizens, civilians, were out of the country? Shouldn't it be the other way around, where U.S. soldiers stay and make sure that civilians get out first, and those Afghans who help the U.S. get out first, and then the soldiers, last of all, leave? That's usually how a withdrawal goes. That's not what happened in this case. And I'm not trying to be, second guess. Yes, what's done is done. But what I'm saying is, and you can probably see my righteous anger right now, these people today did not have to die, these brave U.S. service members. They should not be dead. They were sent back into Kabul after the original decision was made to pull them out, which was clearly a debacle. And now they had to go back in. And it cost at least 12 U.S. service members their lives and at least 15 more seriously wounded. It shouldn't have happened. So yes, there is some righteous anger on my part as a proud American who loves and respects and appreciates our military and the thankless job they do. Basically, they're there in Afghanistan these past 2 weeks doing humanitarian work and lifting babies over fences into the airport. Unbelievable that our soldiers were put in this position, but this is not an event. It's not a rant. Let's move on and let's make sense of it all and what it all means now. The chaos on the ground is still unfolding clearly in Kabul. The August 31st deadline looms. What comes next? U.S. intelligence, U.S. officials are very concerned that there will be more attacks. And again, as I just mentioned, there is now fire at U.S. aircraft. Could ISIS have more plans? Al-Qaeda elements on the ground in Kabul. More plans to strike at the airport yet again. The State Department is telling any U.S. citizens and certainly any Afghans to not come to the airport, which begs the question. If U.S. soldiers are leaving and that withdrawal is still, even after today, if that withdrawal date is solid, rock solid, August 31st, by hook or by crook, we're out of here, and U.S. citizens still stranded, yes, stranded on the ground in Afghanistan, are not allowed to go to the airport because of the terror threat, then how are those U.S. citizens going to get out of Afghanistan by August 31st when U.S. soldiers, it seems, are going to be gone? Someone answer that for me, please. And the Afghans, who will surely be targeted for execution, who worked with the U.S., who literally put their necks on the line, who were promised, hey, don't worry, we'll get you out of here. You don't have to worry about reprisals by the Taliban. We will get you out of here. What about them? What we're leaving behind here, folks, I mentioned this on the newscast this week. And again, we have thousands of people joining us. Welcome. What a day to have you joining us, and what a day to go live as live news is breaking live all around us here. The nightmare scenario that I have considered and discussed on the newscast, knowing how ISIS and Al-Qaeda operate and knowing that they would like nothing more to get their hands on U.S. citizens and take them hostage and parade them in front of the cameras and use them in a propaganda video, perhaps kill them on a propaganda video. I hate to say it, I know, but I'm being realistic. This is a possibility if every last U.S. service member leaves, U.S. forces are out of Afghanistan, and there are still U.S. citizens and Afghans who worked with the U.S. on the ground in Kabul and in other parts of Afghanistan. Do you really think that not only the Taliban, but Al-Qaeda and ISIS will not be hunting for them everywhere around the country? That is what is going to happen if people are left behind. I'm just laying it out for you, folks. This could only be just beginning in many ways. Biden thinks he's kind of closing the book here and taking U.S. soldiers out. It may very well not end on August 31st. I'll say that. And we'll see now. Again, he's making comments, I believe, at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Perfect timing, right when we're done our live stream here. And we'll see what he has to say. Will the U.S. respond against ISIS for what happened today, this suicide terror attack? Or will he just say, we're out of here? Will this hasten the withdrawal? We're getting out of here right away. This only is going to speed up our withdrawal. We'll see. He's going to stammer and stumble and come up to the podium, and we'll see what he says. But, folks, there are Republicans right now, many of them, prominent ones too, calling for President Biden's resignation. And we'll see how this all unfolds over the next few days and weeks and, yes, months. This story is not going away. It's not going away. But that is the state of play right now in Afghanistan. I mentioned at the top, I thought about this right away today, what they want to do. And we've been mentioning Saigon. This is far past the U.S. withdrawal of Saigon in 1975. And you know those images of Americans at the embassy there, literally fleeing in helicopters as the Viet Cong closed in. That was horrific. It was a black eye for America for sure. This is another level of humiliation, of degradation, really, for the United States. And someone called it today a stain on our soul as a nation, the way this has been handled by our quote unquote leaders. And I have to agree. The way this has been handled, we could go on and on about it, but this dwarfs what happened in Saigon at this point. Absolutely. I thought some close parallels, obviously Black Hawk Down, where Bill Clinton did not retaliate after 18 U.S. service members were killed there. And by the way, they killed about 1,000 of the Somali terrorist and warlord types that came against them on Black Hawk Down. So a pretty courageous performance against a severely overmatched group of U.S. service members on Black Hawk Down. Incredible heroism there. Lebanon, 1983, the Marine barracks bombing, 243 U.S. Marines killed, and of course the USS Cole in 2000. So there is a precedent here for terror attacks, jihadi terror attacks against U.S. soldiers. They want to strike out at U.S. prestige, obviously. And what's the symbol of U.S. might and the U.S. as a superpower? The U.S. military and the U.S. military capabilities. So a natural target for jihadis like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and yes, the Taliban. More to come here. Stay tuned. Fasten your seatbelt, folks. And I mentioned at the beginning, I'll mention again, please, please, please keep this situation in your prayers. Prayer works. It really does. I'm not just saying that in a cliched way. Prayer works. And we need to do it right now more than ever for American soldiers on the ground, for Afghans, Afghan Christians on the ground. A nasty situation. We have a Q&A coming up towards the end of this live stream today. So be sure to send your questions along. My trusty producer, Daniel, will send them along to me. Send those questions. The last live stream, we didn't have a lot of questions, and I had comments afterwards saying, "What's up with you, Stakelbeck? You didn't answer my question." I didn't see it, I swear. So please be sure to send it along in a timely manner. I may not answer all of your questions, but I will try to get to as many as I can today in this live stream. So stick around for the Q&A. Okay, prophetic implications of Afghanistan. I know you've been waiting for this, and we will, by the way, get into Israel, Iran, totally overshadowed today for good reason, of course. Naftali Bennett, the Israeli prime minister, is in Washington, D.C. right now. He was scheduled to meet with Joe Biden this morning. That meeting obviously delayed. Will it be canceled altogether? We don't know at the moment, but Bennett in D.C. To meet with Biden. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about comments yesterday by Israel's defense minister, Benny Gantz, that Iran is only 2 months away from having the material needed to build a nuclear bomb. We're talking prophecy. There you go. Afghanistan. A lot of people have asked me over the past few weeks about the prophetic implications. A few things here. And I think at the end of the day, the implications all lead back to the war of Gog and Magog found in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38 and 39, which we have discussed frequently here on our live streams over the past few months because it's getting closer. Number one, in that regard, the United States is weakened. Is it weakened beyond repair? Tough to say right now, but between the inept leadership and this withdrawal from Afghanistan, where we showed incredible weakness, not in a military sense, but in a leadership decision-making sense, an incredible lack of loyalty, not only to Afghans who we worked with, but to our own citizens in Afghanistan. Our allies are disgusted. And look, I have hit out more than anyone against France, Britain, and Germany and their own fecklessness. Where is Winston Churchill when you need him? Where is a strong Western leader? MIA right now. We could use a man like Churchill. Let me tell you, one of my favorite figures from history and a hero of mine, but he's not here right now. And we did have a strong leader in the United States in the form of President Trump, and unfortunately, he is not in office right now to handle this situation. So we're left with what we have, and this could mean that the United States falls from the ranks of a superpower. And I'm a proud American saying this. It breaks my heart and grieves me to my soul to even consider that. I believe as fact, the U.S. has been a force for good in the world since it was founded. But the U.S. is going off the rails right now, internally and obviously in the foreign policy realm in a lot of ways. To whom much is given, much is required. We've been blessed more than any nation in the history of the world. And when a nation turns away from God, that never ends well. And the United States, more and more, there's a millions of believing remnant in this country for sure, and I'm one of them. But millions of my fellow citizens are turning their backs on God, and that ain't good. It never works well. History tells us, the Bible tells us, that's where we're at. So I believe that if the U.S. is no longer able to flex muscle on a global scale and be a force for good, be the leader of the free world, then what you're going to see is the enemies of America, the West, the enemies of humanity, the enemies of Israel, the enemies of all that is good and true. I'm talking the Chinese regime. I'm talking the Iranian regime. I'm talking the likes of Vladimir Putin. They will now be emboldened and empowered. If the leader of the free world is knocked down several pegs and may not be able to get up from it in terms of projecting strength once again, then it will be a field day for the bad guys, for the world's worst actors: Russia, China, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Erdogan in Turkey, North Korea, a nuclear-armed Pakistan, which is a quote-unquote ally of the United States, but which has been in bed with the Taliban since 1996, Pakistani intel and military. So Pakistan nuclear-armed, right? Some, I believe, 100, if not more, nuclear weapons in Pakistan. Taliban right next door now. There have been, over the years, concerns about jihadis taking control in Pakistan. Nuclear-armed jihadis, we've been warning about that every day, right, with Iran, the potential of jihadis there having nuclear weapons. Pakistan already has the bomb, dozens of them, and right next door you have the Taliban, which also has a major presence in Pakistan. Keep a close eye on that. But prophetically, if the U.S. is not what it was, then you could see that Ezekiel 38-39 invasion, folks, because the Bible is very clear. I don't have a Bible in front of me right now, but I know it very well. I'll paraphrase. Ezekiel 38 and 39. If you have not read it, check it out right now. The book of Ezekiel, chapters 38, 39. They lay out a future war. It's called the War of Gog and Magog. Funny name, I know, but these are some of the historic names of the countries that will come against Israel in the latter days. Key phrase there, that's what Ezekiel calls them, the latter days, when this invasion of Israel happens, a confederation of nations, which I believe include Russia, Turkey, Iran. Iran is specifically named as part of this invasion force in the Bible. Persia, that's the ancient name for modern-day Iran. Iran, Russia, Turkey, perhaps some of the stands around Afghanistan. I don't know that the Taliban would have their act together enough to get involved in that invasion force, but countries which were former Soviet republics in that region as well. Countries in North Africa. Libya is named by Ezekiel. Many think Algeria may be part of that. And by the way, what may be a prophetic event this week that has not caught a lot of notice for good reason, what's going on in Afghanistan, but Algeria cut diplomatic ties with Morocco because of Morocco's increasingly close relationship with Israel. Remember, Morocco is one of those Abraham Accords nations, and Yair Lapid, the foreign minister of Israel, was in Morocco recently. Apparently, he was critical of Algeria. Algeria is infuriated, and Israel says, look, Algeria is on the wrong side of history and more in that Iran axis. That ain't a good place to be. But now you can see, wow, does that have Ezekiel 38 implications? Algeria taking this nasty stance towards friends of Israel and towards Morocco. So keep an eye on that. But if the U.S. is out of the way, and again, I'm paraphrasing the book of Ezekiel 38 and 39, chapters 38 and 39, but it says that the young lions, the merchants of Sheba and Dedan, which many think are the Saudis and the UAE, Tarshish, many think is Western Europe, Britain, Spain, perhaps, and the young lions thereof. Many think the young lions refer to the United States. The Bible says when this invasion force forms on the mountains of Israel, Russia, and they're already on the mountains of Israel. Russia is in Syria right now. There are stones throw from the mountains of Israel, as is Turkey, as is Iran. When they gather and they're getting ready and they're surrounding Israel, which is the size of the state of New Jersey, just a reminder, it says the young lions and the merchants of Tarshish and Sheba and Dedan, they protest. They say, why are you doing this? Have you come to take great spoil, riches? Why are you doing this? They say to the invasion force that's coming against Israel, but they don't do anything about it. They'll lodge a protest at the UN, but they're not going to help Israel. Now, I've always looked at that prophecy, which, again, has not happened yet. I've always looked at that and said, wow, which U.S. president would turn his back on Israel in that situation? I believe Barack Obama, there was certainly a chance he would have. Donald Trump clearly would not have, the most pro-Israel president in American history. But based on what I've seen in Afghanistan over the past 2 weeks and how America's reputation and strength have been tarnished, and that we have completely inept leadership in the Oval Office right now, could anyone watching, would you doubt that America would stand by as Israel was being surrounded and protest and talk to the UN and lodge a complaint, the Secretary of State, but not do anything physically? I think we are at that moment right now more than we've ever been, where Israel may be alone in a geopolitical sense, not alone diplomatically, by the way. Great relations, the Abraham Accords, obviously forging closer relations with its Sunni Arab neighbors, with nations in Latin America, in Africa, India, Eastern Europe. So not alone diplomatically. Israel is not without friends in the world, but perhaps alone militarily, because the West will lack the backbone to stand with Israel and the moral clarity to stand with Israel as the enemies are gathering. And yeah, they protest and they say, why are you doing this? But they don't do anything. They don't intervene. And Israel is left to its own devices. And you say, oh no, here's the good news. Israel has the ultimate ally, the ally of all allies, the God of the universe, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God Almighty. during this war of Gog and Magog, which isn't much of a war because God shows his face to the world. I mean the entire world. Everyone's going to see it in a way they haven't in 2,000 years. God is going to show his face publicly and undeniably to the world. And he will destroy those armies on the mountains of Israel. Israel prevails with a resounding victory, and the victory is God's during that war of Gog and Magog. And 85% of those invading armies will be destroyed as God intervenes, hail, fire, brimstone, an earthquake, the whole 9 yards. And you might say, oh, this is crazy, this Bible talk, you religious crazy. Well, you're going to be referring to your Bible when this happens. And you'll say, man, that Stakelbeck guy talked about this. Well, I'm what I do is not brain surgery. I read the Bible and I believe what's in it, especially when it comes to prophecy. And many prophecies in the Bible have been fulfilled. It's got a 100% accuracy rate, but many have not. That war of Gog and Magog is one that has not. And folks, it is not being a doomsayer or an alarmist, but the chess pieces, the prophetic chess pieces are moving on the board, and it probably has not been as close ever as it is right now. Russia, Iran, and Turkey historically over the centuries have been at each other's throats. Let me make that clear. Now they're meeting on a regular basis. The leaders of Russia, Iran, and Turkey, they're getting together in Ankara and Moscow for these summits, and they look very cheery and cozy together. And they're all in Syria right now at Israel's doorstep, a stone's throw from the mountains of Israel. Fasten your seatbelts. But you know what? These are perilous times, but they are Bible times. Look up. Look up, folks. And if you're watching right now and you don't know Jesus, you don't know anything about him, you want no parts of them, I strongly urge you to reconsider. It's a choice only you can make. That's a great thing about our God. He doesn't say, you must worship me, bow down now. No, you have free will. It's your choice. And God lays it out there for you. It's your decision. He's a loving, tender, gentle Father. And he will give you that decision. He will reveal himself to you. Open your heart. He's there knocking at the door. Jesus is knocking at the door of your heart. Open up now. Time is short. And again, I'm not trying to be an alarmist and a doomsayer, but man, oh man, I know we've got a lot of believers out there, and we're filled with the Holy Spirit. And when you have the Holy Spirit, you have something called discernment, clarity. And man, I feel it. And I'm sure many thousands of people that we have watching right now feel it as well. Things are moving. And the word I've been using is acceleration. Acceleration for the good and clearly for the bad. Acceleration for the bad in terms of the sinister schemes, and that's the term I'll use, of the likes of China looking at Taiwan, North Korea looking at South Korea, Russia looking at Ukraine and the Baltics perhaps, and Iran and its proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas eyeing up Israel. Perhaps they thought, well, maybe 3 years we'll mount an attack, maybe 5 years from now. What's happening in Afghanistan right now, another prophetic implication, not only paving the way for the Ezekiel war, but accelerating things, accelerating the plans perhaps of people who say, wow, the U.S. is down right now. Let's strike while the iron's hot. Let's take advantage of the weakness of the U.S. and the weak leadership in Washington right now. They won't stop us. Let's do it now. Let's take advantage now. Acceleration. Everything's accelerating very, very fast, you know. And over the years, before COVID, we would say, man, Bible times, and it's coming. And now we're in those Bible times. So don't lose heart and get discouraged and say, oh my gosh, my heart's going to fail me. No, we have an opportunity right now as followers of Jesus to be salt and light. God has given us a mandate to be a light in this darkness. And that's what I'm going to do. And I hope you're going to do it too. Not everyone can yak on TV like me, but in your own space, wherever God has you planted around the world. We have viewers here from around the world. Wherever God has you planted right now, maybe it's just in your church, it's in your school, it's in your place of work, it's within your family. You can be an ambassador for Christ. And folks, look, that involves, I've talked about this a lot on our live streams, that involves walking the walk. Practice what you preach. and try and live as blamelessly as you can before the Lord. No one's perfect. We're all sinners. That's why Jesus went to the cross. But try and live out your faith. I can tell you, before we hit Iran, Israel here real quick, then we take questions. I can tell you that in my experience, it's one thing to share the gospel with someone verbally, give them a Bible. That's awesome. That's great. But today in particular, especially with the younger people, they're looking for authenticity. All right, this guy's talking about Jesus and he's telling me all these great things about following Jesus and being a Christian, but how does he act? Is he saying that on one hand, and then on the other hand, he's acting like a heathen? That's an old school word for you. How does he act? Does he live out? Does he practice what he preaches? That's the key. Live out your faith. Be an ambassador for Christ. I think that's the key right now for the times we are in, to be authentic and really live out our faith. We want to talk real quick about Israel and Iran before we hit questions. We're winding down a bit here, so we want to leave about at least 15 minutes for questions. I just want to mention to you real quick, Naftali Bennett is here. He's in D.C. I'm in the States right now. He's in Washington, D.C. He's going to meet with Joe Biden. Perhaps, are they going to delay it? By the time you watch this, they may have met already. Perhaps the meeting's canceled. We don't know yet. It's right now, it's 4:40 p.m. Eastern time, Thursday, August 26th. Are they going to meet tonight? It was obviously pushed back for understandable reasons, the terror attack against U.S. service members in Afghanistan today. But will they meet? When they meet, the Iran nuclear program, Iran's nuclear weapons program will undoubtedly be at the top of the list. So what are they going to talk about in addition to that? The Palestinian state issue, will that come up? I'm sure it will on Biden's end. Bennett does not support a Palestinian state. You can bet that Bennett is going to turn things to Iran, and rightly so. Look, Benny Gantz, the Israeli defense minister, said this week that he believes Iran is only 2 months away from having the materials needed to develop a nuclear bomb. By the way, we have thousands of people with us right now. If you are just joining us, if you missed the first 40 minutes or so of our live stream, check it out here in our archives. We will post this entire 1 hour live stream on YouTube when we are finished. So if you missed the first 40 minutes or so, you can check out what you missed. It'll be posted today. Bennett, a new prime minister, 2 months in office, obviously. Biden, relatively new. So two leaders. I'm not sure that they've met in person yet. Perhaps they have over the years. I'm not quite sure. Bennett was also defense minister and education minister. So perhaps their paths have crossed. I'm not quite sure about that. But certainly this is their first meeting as the respective leaders of their nations. So hopefully we'll get some feedback on how that meeting goes, if it does indeed still go down with the Afghanistan situation unfolding. But Iran, certainly, I interviewed today, and you'll see it, I believe, on tomorrow's newscast, just a programming note there. Yaakov Amidror, General Yaakov Amidror, was the national security advisor for Israel under Prime Minister Netanyahu from 2011 to 2013. One of Israel's foremost national security authorities interviewed him today. You'll see it tomorrow on the newscast. He talked about a range of issues, Afghanistan, Iran, but he said, and he stressed, time is short and getting shorter in terms of dealing with Iran. The nuclear program, it's kind of nearing 0 hour now. That's not hyperbole. That's him saying it. And in terms of acceleration and Iran testing the waters and the U.S. being weakened, remember, Iran will also look to test this new Israeli government. It's only been in office for a little over 2 months. And Iran itself has a new government, right? Remember, Ibrahim Raisi, the butcher of Tehran, as he's known, he is now the Iranian president, arguably the second most powerful man in that country behind the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who Raisi is very close to. He is seen as a possible successor to Ayatollah Khamenei. And he has surrounded himself, has Ibrahim Raisi, with the most radical Iranian government. And that's saying something. The most radical Iranian government we have ever seen since 1979, littered with terrorists, Hezbollah supporters, people under investigation for terror, Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps members, people sanctioned by the United States government. So the Iran nuclear deal, and we talked about this on yesterday's newscast. Check it out in our archives here on YouTube. It may be DOA, dead on arrival. As badly as Biden wants that Iran deal, Iran, with the direction they're taking, it may be impossible to find any sort of acceptable common ground at the negotiating table with this new Iranian government, which is a terror government. I say that without hesitation. Hey, real quick, we have a bunch of questions here. Let's get the Q&A. We've got 15 minutes left, plenty of time. I also want to just scan the headlines. The world waits to hear from Joe Biden as ISIS claims responsibility for the attack. He's been silent, Biden, since the morning. One more scan, and then we'll get into Q&A. Let's see. I just want to be up to date with you guys. Okay. The U.S., one headline here, I don't know which source. The U.S. is sharing intel with the Taliban. The CENTCOM commander revealed the U.S. is intelligence sharing with the Taliban. How comforting. This is what it's come to. We're sharing intel. We're trusting the Taliban. Okay. I'll control myself. I'll restrain myself because we have to take questions right now. Question number one, which Daniel sent along. And thank you for your questions. Keep sending them. God bless everyone for joining. I know it's a busy day. Here's a good question from Lipaz Dotan, Israeli, I presume. Shalom, if so. Eric, how do you believe the Biden administration sees Naftali Bennett? Should we in Israel be worried based on what is happening in Afghanistan? Well, number one, we in America should be worried, number one. Secondly, Israel should be highly concerned. I'll get to the Bennett question in a second. It's a good one. Israel should be concerned in that Iran right now, under President Trump, for instance, Iran, its proxies, that ring of fire that surrounds Israel right now, armed to the teeth with thousands upon thousands of rockets, missiles, and attack drones. They would have not have been so quick to act when President Trump and the U.S. were in Israel's corner. Now, if the U.S. is MIA, Iran and those terror proxies, they will get very bold now. They will test the waters, not only because of the weakened state of the United States, but there is a new Israeli leadership. So I expect Iran and the rest of its proxies to test the waters in the weeks and months to come. Iran is very happy about what's happening in Afghanistan. They are gleeful over it, and they see the demise of the great Satan, in their words, the United States, at hand. So Israel should be concerned, but as I mentioned earlier, concerned but aware and prepared. Look, and the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, are prepared, folks. I can tell you from firsthand experience joining the IDF on drills, live fire drills, nighttime tank drills over the past few years, that the IDF is very, very well prepared for what is coming from the north. And the threat will come from the north, the great northern war that's coming. We've talked about it a lot here in the newscast. As to your question on how the Biden administration sees Bennett, they're probably not too fond of Naftali Bennett, who is a right-wing guy, who is pro-Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland, what the world refers to as settlements. Bennett has been very much support in building up the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria. Again, the biblical heartland. A good portion of your Bible before King David took place in Judea and Samaria. I can't stress that enough. It's such great meaning for the people of Israel. So they're not big Bennett fans, I'm sure. He's hawkish, he's on the right. But I can tell you that the Biden administration is probably very encouraged by the other members of Naftali Bennett's coalition, which is a far-flung group, which includes an Islamist organization, the Ra'am Party, which has ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, for goodness sakes. Then we have far left-wing parties in there as well as part of this coalition. I believe there are 8 political parties in all in this coalition. So the Biden administration may say that, Bennett, may have one set of beliefs and views and a certain ideology, but perhaps the more left-wing elements of that coalition will rein him in and block him from getting things done. That's probably what they're banking on. Believe me, Naftali Bennett is not the ideal candidate or the ideal prime minister that the Biden administration wants to deal with. But two things: they believe he may have his coalition to rein him in. And number two, Bennett seems determined, and it's too early to judge him yet. Look, he's been in office for 2 years. I interviewed him way back in 2014. I think I posted it here in the newscast a few months ago. So I've interviewed him, been in the room with him, but it's too early to judge his performance yet as prime minister. It's 2 months, and we'll see. There's a lot unfolding. We've talked about what's happening at the Gaza border a lot this week. So too early to judge, but this is a big litmus test. What comes out of this meeting with Biden, if it happens here in D.C., but Bennett seems determined to make this a more conciliatory meeting. We shall see. Good question, though. Let's look at some more questions here. Okay, what do we have here? Good question from Walden Smith. Hi, Eric. If the U.S. troops engage ISIS, which they should after what happened today, will the Taliban and al-Qaeda stand in solidarity and support ISIS to further attack U.S. soldiers? Walden, that's a great question. Anything is possible. Expect the unexpected right now in Afghanistan and in particular in Kabul. I'm not ruling anything out. As I mentioned earlier, the Taliban, ISIS have not gotten along traditionally. We do know that Taliban and al-Qaeda are very close, but could the Taliban and ISIS coordinate in this situation and then turn their swords on each other afterwards? But in this situation, when U.S. soldiers and civilians are still on the ground, could they collaborate? Yes, there's a possibility. Perhaps it's back channels and perhaps it's not public cooperation. Perhaps the Taliban tries to keep it under wraps, so to speak, but there is certainly the potential for the Taliban to turn their guns on U.S. soldiers as well. It's certainly there. As much as CENTCOM and the Biden administration says, well, we're sharing intel with the Taliban and we're working with them to help facilitate. Madness. This is madness. So the Taliban, it goes without saying, can't be trusted. Joe Biden himself said back in July in a press conference that he did not trust the Taliban. Now apparently he does. But the Taliban is an easy target in the sense that, look, the presidential palace in Kabul, Mullah Baradar, the leader of the Taliban, is presumably sitting in there right now. It's easy to target Taliban leaders. We pretty much know where they are right now. ISIS, tougher nut to crack. Where are they? And perhaps to locate ISIS hideouts, you need people on the ground. And you need people to leave the airport. You need to authorize U.S. soldiers to leave the airports. We've had a few instances of that in the past few days. U.S. helicopters have rescued American citizens and brought them back. The CIA reportedly is on the ground as well. Special ops, I'm sure. I'm sure there's things going on behind the scenes. But to locate ISIS, you would think you need some boots on the ground that are going to leave the airport and scour the city and the country looking for their hideouts. The Taliban is more out in the open. Look, they're there. They're giving a show of force in the streets of Kabul and in other cities in Afghanistan right now. So they're an easier target. If they start firing on U.S. soldiers and stirring things up, they will be, at least they should be, hit with overwhelming, devastating, deadly force. But certainly nothing, Walden, great question, nothing is outside the realm of possibility right now. We have about 50, well, it's probably about 5,200 U.S. soldiers now. There were 5,800. Some 600 have already left. Some 5,200 soldiers on the ground congregated at Kabul Airport. If these jihadi elements decide to pool their resources and unite, it'll be a nasty situation. But these U.S. soldiers, highly trained, best of the best, and let's just keep praying that it doesn't come to that. But I would expect some sort of U.S. response after what happened this morning. 12 U.S. service members killed. If there is not any sort of U.S. response against the jihadi terrorists who were responsible and their friends and allies, then we've got a serious problem. That dent in the prestige of the United States that we've been talking about throughout this newscast will become even more brutally obvious. Not good. Let's look at some more questions. That was two great ones. 1 second. Good question. Jack Daniels, probably not his real name, but Jack asks, Eric, wasn't it Donald Trump who originally wanted to get our troops out of Afghanistan last year and eliminate the security there in the first place? Yes, Jack. Donald Trump did indeed plan to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Without a doubt. He drew down the troop presence from 16,000 to 2,500. Joe Biden then removed all 2,500, or was in the process of doing it. So yes, President Trump undoubtedly was planning to withdraw U.S. troops. But planning is the operative word here. He had a plan. There's a reason that no U.S. soldier had been killed before today since February 2020 in Afghanistan, nearly 2 years since a U.S. soldier had been killed. President Trump was very clear in his conversations with the leadership of the Taliban. If you harm one hair on the head of any U.S. soldier who's leaving and of any of our friends, American citizens there, you will be met with devastating, incredible force. And the Taliban believed him. And Jack, do you know why the Taliban believed him and held their fire and didn't do anything while Trump was in office? Because they saw what Trump did to the caliphate in Iraq and Syria. He smashed it. He kept his word. He killed the leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And they saw, perhaps even more importantly, what the U.S. did to Qasem Soleimani, the world's #1 terrorist, the arch terrorist from Iran. He was killed by the United States in an airstrike in January 2020. They saw what he did with Assad, the Assad regime, and rockets launched there. So the Taliban said, wow, this Trump guy, he seems pretty tough. He seems to mean what he says. Maybe we should kind of hold our fire and pray he gets out of office. Sadly, that's what happened. They don't have the same healthy respect and fear of Joe Biden, to say the least. So, Jack, yes, President Trump did have a plan to withdraw U.S. troops, and we can go back and forth on whether we should have kept a contingent of troops there for a few more years or taken them out. That's not the debate. The debate, and Joe Biden keeps saying, well, when he comes out, when he does speak, well, you know, it was time to withdraw the troops. We're not debating that. What we're debating is the way you are withdrawing the troops, which is, it's up there, folks, at the very top of the greatest foreign policy disasters in U.S. history. Jack, this would not have happened under President Trump. I'm not a Trump booster and all. I'm not being a cheerleader, just being honest, common sense. It also would not have happened under Ronald Reagan. I can name many presidents it would not have happened under, but President Trump obviously was intimately involved in the Taliban situation. I saw a clip from him yesterday from 2017 in which he laid out his plan and said, we can't leave hastily and hand the country over to the Taliban and make it a terror base once again. Guess what, Jack? That just happened. God bless you. Thanks for the question. Last question, 457. Let's see here. We have 3 minutes. Let's see. Last question, good one to end on. Bernadette Van Wyk asks, Eric, what will this mean for service members in Iraq and Syria? Will they now be targeted? Bernadette, great question. And God forbid, I believe that may very well happen. Iran is going to take this Afghanistan blueprint and they're going to say, hey, we chased them out of Afghanistan, or at least the Taliban chased them out, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. Now let's chase them out of Iraq. Let's duplicate the embarrassment and the national shame for America that happened in Afghanistan. Let's duplicate that in Iraq and Syria. Now, I believe there are 800, 900 U.S. soldiers in Syria, and I believe 2,000, between 2,000 and 3,000 in Iraq right now. Iran, we've talked about this often on the newscast, has been launching attacks against those U.S. soldiers through its proxies, as Iraqi Shia militias, drone attacks, rocket attacks, many, and increasing under the Biden administration. Been a bit quiet the past month or so, but that was a steady drumbeat of attacks against U.S. personnel there in Iraq. So yes, Bernadette, great question. They will try to create an atmosphere where the U.S., the impression is given that the U.S. is leaving Iraq and Syria with its tail between its legs, as it did in Afghanistan. And again, I don't mean the U.S. military with its tail between its legs. I mean the leadership with it making these decisions with its tail between its legs. And believe me, our military men and women, they want to stand toe-to-toe with terrorists and with evil men. If they had the opportunity and the authorization, they would do so. And before this is all said and done, they may very well do so. We'll keep a close eye on it for you for sure. But yes, I'm concerned about Iraq, Bernadette. Great question. Again, they want to duplicate that Afghanistan model. Hey, everyone, 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much for joining us. Much more to discuss on tomorrow's newscast. Don't miss it right here on YouTube. If you have not subscribed, be sure to subscribe. Click the notification bell so you get alerts every time we post a video, a live video. Pray for the situation in Afghanistan right now, folks. Pray for the families, the loved ones of those who were killed. God bless you. Until tomorrow, never hold your peace.